Hello and welcome to another podcast of Father and Joe. I am Joe Rocky, here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, we've occasionally talked about things that come up in my life that have been kind of real life examples, with the hope being that other people can relate to them and see how it went in their life and what they should have done or not done. And, how do you tell me kind of some guidance as far as what was a good idea and what wasn't a good idea? And the last time we did this, we talked about when it was snowing, and I ended up shoveling out my driveway and got all upset that someone parked right where I had just shoveled. Um, so, in my nature of my business, I have deadlines come up quite often. We hire someone to tile this kitchen floor. We expect it done in this amount of agreed upon time. New hardwood floor and paint it. Whatever. Everything has a timeline in which we expect it to be done, and it's not me imposing it upon the contractors. It's this is what you said, this is what we agreed upon, and so on and so forth. To try to add a layer of accountability. So recently, I've had a project that had just been taking forever. We're twice as long as we should have been. But every time I get to the point where I'm like, all right, I gotta let this guy go, the work he's producing is just off the charts in quality. So I'm essentially letting him slide on the time limit because the quality is just so good. But it's getting to me because I have partners to answer to. We have a whole business here. It's not just what I want. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. But it's true. It's not just what I want. So we're getting to the end here, and I'm talking to him on Thursday afternoon, 3 to 4 weeks after it was supposed to be done, and I go, "Is this absolutely going to be done by the end of the day tomorrow?" He's got 4 hours worth of work. Like, should be absolutely no reason this isn't done. And it's much bigger issue at the end of a project than the middle of the project. Because at the end of the project, I have a lot more moving pieces. I got to get my realtor in there. I got to get the staging people to bring the furniture so it looks good. I got to get a photographer in there. And there's many moving parts with, you want to get it all to line up. Just a lot easier, a lot more efficient that way. So if there's a snag at the end, it's a lot more problemsome. So long story short, I come over with the realtor on Monday, and it's not done. And not only is it not done, there's no one in there doing anything. So I get very upset. Kind of go through how we talked about before about how anger is really you got hurt about something. He's I felt lied to because I was, but went through this entire range of emotion. I'm embarrassed. I'm there with my realtor saying everything's gonna be done, and now it's not, and it's a lot of little things. Like I said, it's only 4 hours. It was basically a lot of touch up painting that if you tried to list it now, it would look like you were cutting corners throughout the whole process, and no one's going to want your house. So that's a problem. You want to do a completed project. So that being said, go through this whole range of feelings and get my phone out, about to call him up, but just kind of stop. Actually, thought to that recording of that cast we had before about the snow, and kind of calmed down. Ended up rescheduling everyone I had to reschedule for, and just kind of let it mellow out. But now I'm here on the other side of the fence. I didn't really forcefully address it. We did eventually finish the house. Partially is the way that the contract was. I had to use him to finish it, but I was in this weird zone of what do I do now? Do I flip out at him that you told me you were going to have done with this house 4 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, and now when I was standing with you on Thursday, you said, "Hey, no questions asked. We're done on Friday." And I'm standing here Monday, and there's no one in here. It's not done, and there's no one working on it. And where does this leave me? And there's a lot of different directions you can go. I mean, obviously, we're at a spot now where this is a little bit of a habit, repeated behavior. Do I just treat them like a pizza place where I got a bad pizza, so I'll eat this one, but I'm not going to buy you next time? Or, where does that leave me? And then, do I let it go unsaid and invite the problem to continue? So that's where I was with that. And it's, like I said, on the management side of something of how to do it. Because I imagine that we all have had coworkers or people we've worked for that said they were going to do something and it didn't get done, and you wish that something different could occur. And I'm actually at a spot where I can make something different occur, so I wanted to sit back and take this opportunity to figure out, in the ideal world, what is the direction that should be addressed? How should things go down? So I know that was a very lengthy introduction, a lot longer than normal ones, but
it's a great real situation.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about a couple of podcasts ago, the will of God is going to unfold in the matrix, the context of your own life, your job, your vocation. And these are the kinds of things where, taking on the qualities of Jesus, if you have the gift of counsel, if you're able to see as Jesus sees, what does that look like? So it's a good opportunity to pray in those difficult situations. These are the real life situations where the rubber hits the road, and it should make a difference that we're Christian. So I love that you're looking into that, asking those questions, and I think you already gave a good witness about some points. I don't think there's ever a place for Christians to just fly off the handle. I don't think that there isn't virtue there. Now again, whatever, we have a bad day, we make mistakes, we all have weakness. It's not a matter of beating ourselves up or judging ourselves for that. But I don't think that's what we're striving for ever, is to just fly off the handle.
Yeah, and it wasn't that urge wasn't there though. I mean, I definitely had the urge overcome me that I wanted to get right on that phone and kind of lay into them. And yeah, so I don't know if the idea was to never have that urge or not, but it definitely
well, we're all
hit me.
Tempted.
The temptation was there. It was there in a really big and real way.
And then just as you described it, I really appreciate that. You see that urge there, and then what do you do with that? You can add fuel to that fire and start to justify it and find your way into a place that you can really let him have it. Or you can step back and say, okay, is this the right thing to do? And am I just going to let out this urge? So I love how you handled that. And I think that's part of the ideal. Like I said in that podcast a couple episodes ago, a goal we can hold on to, very simple, is to always keep our peace. As soon as we see some of those urges to lose control and to, let out our anger, okay, that's where we want to take a step back and say, I'm not gonna freak out about this. So now there may be a time that we have to speak strongly and even speak threatening words, but we want to do that from a position of peacefulness. That's kind of the ideal that we're striving for. There's even a place for anger. Anger is a resistance to evil, and we can have a properly expressed anger, which isn't just blowing our lids. There's a firm response to something that's evil that we get determined and we have strength from, and we persevere to work out whatever that is. So, but one of the things that I heard in what you were sharing was he did excellent quality work.
Yeah.
And so that made a difference to you.
Well, in some, yes, obviously it did. Because had he not, I don't think I would have dealt with the extra 4 weeks of working time had these bathrooms not just turned out amazing and the kitchen floor is, yeah, I mean, it was all, it's a very, very pretty house. Structurally sound, all that fun stuff too. But the aesthetics, the finish work was just spot on. And it just was taking forever. And, I get 30 different excuses of why it takes forever, which I'm sure that a lot of people have seen in their lives. Why isn't this done? And you get, many, many reasons. Some are valid, some are made up, but you can just tell right on the spot. And overall, for this project, I kind of let it go because of the quality of work that was there. Had the quality of work not been there, I don't think I would have let him continue. So I bring this up looking at it from a bunch of different directions. I have other people who work for me that see that he's getting all of this extra, in their minds, probably favors that I'm not cracking down on him. But it's because, look at it. This is how I've always wanted a master bathroom to look like, and it finally, after 5 years, someone nailed it. So there's that element of it, but it took forever. Now, maybe the reason it took forever is because that's how long it takes, and my expectations are wrong. I admit that that's part of it, but I also know that there was a lot of dead time that there didn't need to be. So there's probably a little bit of both in there.
So I hear, because of that quality, there's a part of you that would like to work with him in the future because he does great work.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how, you have a whole culture of interaction in terms of contractors that I don't understand because I'm not in that. But what comes to me, and you can tell me whether this is reasonable or not, is that if you're able to have a conversation with him, and I don't know if that happens after this job or if it happens before a next potential job. And I always like to start out by building people up and being clear about what I appreciate, and say, you do fantastic work. I mean, this master bathroom is what I've wanted forever. I think this is fantastic. But you caused me a lot of problems when we agreed on a deadline, and then even coming up to the very end of it, it's one thing to stretch it out in the middle, but at the end of it, if I can't depend on you to finish that deadline, I can't work with you. Is that something that we can work out? Can you give me a more realistic expectation? Is that, really a one-time thing that's not going to repeat? Is that, let's be honest.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you got to craft that in terms of your own language of interaction among contractors and things like that. But that's the kind of thing that comes to me, is I like to just face problems and try and deal with them.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's definitely something that we do. In fact, actually, this is, you talk about general problems. This is probably one you're dealing with any contractor, regardless of which particularly crew I'm discussing. And I had it with another one. Both of them kind of overlapped around the same ballpark of last fallish. And, I sat down and I was like, why is everything so delayed now? Found out some stuff that was happening with him on, outside of the work world that was taking him away from job sites to go take care of some other things on his personal side that he had to do. And that made sense to me. And it took about a week, maybe two, to clear up that side of his fence. And then, boom, he was right back at it. And so, there was 2 weeks of dead period there, but we recovered. And I was able to say we got right back to where we were before. To me, that made sense. Why that we had this lag. Basically, I'll deal with the partners, and that'll be a later problem. And never really had a problem with them. have no problem throwing him on other gigs thereafter. But it was the first guy I brought up in this story who just always a ring of different excuses and reasons, and yeah, and now I'm getting to the point of, do I want to bring him back on, or at least give him opportunity to bid on another job? And I'm not totally sure, like, if it's worth it, I guess is what I'm trying to get to at the end of the day here. Is, I got a lot of projects that, especially the bigger the project it is, the more timely it has to be for a variety of reasons. Not the least of which is the government inspections only give you so much time to. The government gives you timelines on top of it, opposed to just the partners to make the business run. So,
Yeah.
they say this foundation needs to be done within 3 weeks, or we're shutting your job down. It needs to be done. There are no real ways around that. So, I bring this up because it's one of these ones where I'm torn with, because I've always had this feeling, and economically, I believe it's true that, when I hire someone, I'm not just taking care of that guy. I'm taking care of all of his drywall guys and painters underneath him, and by extension, their families as well. So,
You have a beautiful
that's a
sense of
thing.
that. Yep.
But in turns, I also have to choose between one or the other,
Right.
which has the same effects there. And I'm sure that anyone who's ever been in a hiring situation or applying for a job has felt that from either side of the fence. So I guess that's part of what I'm trying to
Well,
dig at here.
and again, just to affirm your thinking about that, I think trying to evaluate that from a peaceful place and trying to be balanced about that and trying to see what are the things that you've got to keep in mind, and can you afford to have this process unfold again? Do you have a confidence that it's going to be different this time? Those are a lot of things that you've got to balance. Now, who knows what's going on underneath? Maybe there are some problems that he didn't feel like he could share with you. And it's one of these kind of tragic situations where you have someone who's incredibly talented, but, also has some addiction problems or has some family issues. Maybe his wife has some mental health issues and he's getting pulled off. Anyway, you never know what's going on underneath all of that. And if he's not going to share it with you, you can't take that into account, So maybe there are some ways to encourage him to be more honest. Maybe there are some ways that he's able to trust you and kind of tell you what the real scoop is, and you can work with him. Anyway, I'm just totally imagining situations now, but just to open up those possibilities. Having said all that, if he's going to give you stories that are half true or not true, and he's not going to be honest with you, you've got your own issues to balance, and you got to do the best you can with that.
Yeah, I guess I suspected some stuff going on. I have no idea what it would be. But there's something going on there. At least that's my estimation. But, I also treat it as, be a professional. If you do have something, going on outside of it, I understand that. But to me, there's a big difference between being direct and forthright versus chronically coming up with excuses. So I said, like, this is it's a tough thing of where I'm at, and unfortunately, that is a plague of the industry. I guess there's a lot of addiction type things out there, and I guess you can make the argument that the industry kind of allows that more. You don't necessarily need to be able to be 100% sober to lay a subfloor, and that's just the facts of life. It's not like you're an attorney presenting to a courtroom or something. So it's just a different nature of it. You're moving drywall and debris all over the place. like I said, my whole thing is I don't try to discriminate because of all that. I understand that that's part of the industry, almost a thing to expect sometimes, but also I hired you to do this. There's an expectation that
That's
you're
right.
gonna do it. So
And we have to be aware too. Now, one path could be that he ends up, kind of trusting you and opening up with you, and maybe there's some kind of thing that goes really beyond a normal contracting relationship that you're able to sort of support him, and I don't know. I'm just totally imagining things. On the other hand, by you upholding a standard, he doesn't trust you or he doesn't really open up, and so you're going to work with him, but by you upholding a standard, maybe that's part of what makes him hit rock bottom and really deal with his problem. I mean, if there's a problem there. So
yeah,
in both directions, God can work with that, but that's why we just want to, keep lifting these things up to him, trying to do it from a peaceful place, that it's not a matter of, working out my retaliation. That guy, you know, was a problem for me and I'm going to have it out to him. I'm cutting him off, I'm going to smear his name. You didn't say any of that, but those are the kinds
mm,
of bad directions we can go in. So the more that we make prudent decisions with love, God will work with all that. Maybe to hit him with the brick wall that he needs to turn his life around. Maybe he uses you as an instrument to kind of get the deeper story, and you're able to support him, and you can kind of manage uh, the, the the difficulties or whatever. But that's yeah, those are the opportunities in being in the real world. So
yeah,
thanks for sharing that. That's a great example.
yeah, and it's weird because, like I said, two crews that two very different outcomes. So that's that's just the thing, and yeah, I mean, I guess that's all the same story in other ways. I'm sure there's some people out there who've had something similar to this because it's really at the end of the day, the question is, am I sacrificing the standards that you'd mentioned just because it was good? Because obviously there's multiple facets to the standard. It's in our world we call it a triangle. You got the 3 points of triangle being quality, speed, and cost. Where do you land in there? So it's always kind of like a little fluctuating matrix. And
Yep.
depending upon the project, sometimes cost is a bigger concern, sometimes speed is, sometimes quality is. So it's a thing there. So like just a obviously he was so high on the quality side, we let the speed suffer. So that's a thing.
No, it's beautiful. Those are real decisions that you have to make, and so you want to do them with as much, consider it from every angle, and talking it through is real helpful. And then we do the best that we can, and we entrust the result to the Lord, and that's part of how we do these things in a Christian way.
Yeah, yeah, because I know that this example, while it was about my business and hire a contractor, it's really at its core, it's going to apply to virtually everyone in some way or another because it's at the end of the day, do you continue a relationship that was rocky or do you cut it off? And we've all been there in one format or another, and that's why I wanted to bring it up and I figured that this type of example would be a little bit better than just a blanket question of when should you just cut something off. So
Mm-hmm.
so that's why we did it there. Hopefully, this helped everyone listening. And if you have any final thoughts as we're concluding the cast here, Father, to give us guidance, maybe a broader thing, or maybe specifically with this example. But if you can give us some parting knowledge as we continue the rest of our weeks here.
Well, I think just taking these things to prayer and just realizing, as you're giving us a good witness, Christianity is not about church on Sunday. It's about taking church on Sunday into everything else in our lives. And so all these decisions are decisions that should be made with prayer and with the help of the Lord. And the more that we do that, it starts to form inside of us It becomes more spontaneous in us, and we become more the little Christs, the presence of Jesus in our all throughout our world.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, again, we thank everyone out there for listening. We thank everyone for spending out the retweets of our tweets we put out every week. And if you haven't begun to follow us at Father and Joe, please do it. And then again, please keep submitting the reviews that you have if you haven't yet. And we look forward to seeing you next week.